Hello and welcome to Senior Solutions, where we bring you topics affecting seniors and their loved ones. I'm your host, Mindy Felinton. Well, some of you who are watching, and I know myself, that I've experienced a couple of changes in my eyes recently, and that is due to the fact that I am aging. My guest today is Dr. James Heltzer, and he's here to talk to us about the changes that we see, why, who, what, where, when, and how. So welcome, Dr. Heltzer.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Tell us what some of the changes are that we can anticipate experiencing as we age in our eyesight, or our eyes, not necessarily our sight.
The first aging change that I think most of us notice happens in our 40s as our lens starts to stiffen inside of our eye. And so the muscle that previously enabled us to move from distance vision to near vision becomes less effective, and so we start to struggle with near vision, and we start to need reading glasses. So that's the first change that most of us notice associated with aging.
And yes, I have had that experience. Presbyopia, is that the
Presbyopia,
term?
hardening of the lens.
Genius. Tell me if there's something that people can do to prevent that or slow down that process prophylactically? There's
not really anything you can do to prevent it. Using your eyes is essentially working that muscle. So the more you read, the more you give yourself that near focus, the more effectively you're going to sort of stave off and slow down that process. One bit of advice that I always have for people who are moderately nearsighted is to make sure not to read with your glasses off. If you read with your glasses off, the nearsightedness, in essence, the compressing light waves, enable you to read without using that muscle, and so the muscle weakens. This is sort of counterintuitive for people, because these compressing light rays give you that near focal point. When you put on a pair of glasses, those light rays go out parallel, and then you've used your focusing muscles all of your life to compress those light waves and bring the near things into focus. And so people think counterintuitively, oh, I'm taking off my glasses, I'm doing all the work myself. When in reality, what you want to do is use a pair of reading glasses or a pair of bifocals that your ophthalmologist or optometrist is giving you, because they give you a little bit of that help, and then you do the rest of the accommodative work yourself. And so it enables you to keep that muscle stronger for longer. So that's one sort of secret to this that I advise people to follow.
Thank you. Good to know. Okay, so what would be the next tier of eye conditions that affect us as we age?
There are three main eye conditions that affect seniors: macular degeneration, glaucoma, and cataracts.
So let's start with the macular degeneration. I know I hear a lot about that, both personally and professionally, people who suffer from that. And I believe there are different types, the wet and the dry. So if you could explain what macular degeneration is, and then talk about, I guess, what things one can do, and is it hereditary, etc.?
Macular degeneration is hereditary. I wish we did understand it better, but it's one of these conditions where essentially, as we age, we're outliving our eyes. And so you start to accumulate debris and waste products in the most important part of the eye for central vision, the macula, and that starts to break down. And then there are two main categories of macular degeneration: a dry type and a wet type. The dry type is just sort of a generalized breakdown of that tissue, and there isn't really so much we can do to prevent progression from that side of things beyond some of the prophylactic things that you can do: wearing sunglasses and taking a multivitamin with particular antioxidants that were designated by the AREDS, the Age-Related Eye Disease Study. And those vitamins include vitamin C, vitamin E, zinc, beta-carotene, and copper.
So those are the ones that you would recommend?
Yeah, there are particular formulations that the AREDS studies have demonstrated are effective in slowing the rate of progression of macular degeneration. More recent variants of the AREDS study, the AREDS-2 study, looked at substituting lutein for beta-carotene because of the increased risk of developing particular types of cancers associated with beta-carotene in smokers. So we tried to substitute the lutein for the beta-carotene to evaluate its efficacy, and it was shown that lutein is as effective as the beta-carotene.
Yeah, well, I've been taking lutein for years personally, but not necessarily the other things. So is that something then that's available, the component, all of those components together? It's over the counter. It's not something that it would be a prescription to get all of those components in one?
Correct. You don't need a prescription for this. This is available. There are any number of proprietary eye vitamins that you'll see labeled with the AREDS formulation on them.
How do you spell that?
AREDS. The Age-Related Eye Disease Study is that acronym.
Okay.
AREDS, yes.
All right.
And so for smokers, just be cautious about the beta-carotene because of the increased risk of cancer, and make sure that you use a substituted lutein formulation.
Okay. Well, let's hope there's nobody smoking out there.
Correct.
Hope springs eternal. And so that was about the dry that you were just sharing.
Correct. So sunglasses and that multivitamin, and then there's a wet type of macular degeneration. And the wet type of macular degeneration is more characterized by the development of new blood vessels that break through the macula and start to distort the architecture by leading to leakage, which leads to swelling and irregularities and undulations in the tissue that can create scarring and other permanent problems. And we've made a tremendous amount of progress on that front over the past few years with a series of different type of injectable medications, what are called anti-VEGF treatments, that are in essence enabled to dry up these leaking blood vessels and keep them from causing the kinds of scarring problems we saw in the not-so-recent past.
Mm-hmm. But they're not effective for everyone, correct?
They're not effective for everyone, but they're quite effective, and they're effective for most.
Is there something in particular about someone's anatomy or any component that would prevent them from using those shots successfully, or it's just random?
I don't think it's random, but I don't think we understand it that well. There are different patterns of leakage. There are different types of blood vessels, and some are more successful with one type of injection than another type. And sort of empirically, we try different approaches to see what works and what doesn't work, and I think for the most part we've become very successful. It has been in the not-so-recent past, within 3 or 4 years, a very devastating condition that for the most part now we're able to keep at bay quite effectively with a continued series of surveillance and treatment when necessary.
But that's the wet.
That's the wet type.
The dry there haven't been as many breakthroughs?
There haven't been as many breakthroughs, but remember, though, that all of our treatment goals involving the wet are really to turn it to the dry kind, because the dry is so much slower in its progressive process. Mm-hmm. What's devastating is the rapidity of vision loss associated with the wet type of macular degeneration. The drier types of macular degeneration, for the most part, move much more slowly and are gradual in onset.
Mm-hmm. So I guess prophylactically you would also recommend, or do you recommend, that people wear glasses, sunglasses?
For sure, the sunglasses. The studies haven't really shown prophylactic benefit, but I think it's not unreasonable to have a diet rich in antioxidants, so that guidance you got from your mom about eating all those green leafy vegetables, turns out kale and spinach and collard greens and those sorts of green vegetables are really beneficial. In fact, in the newest version of the AREDS study, when they really stratified people according to diet, those folks with really good diets didn't achieve a very significant benefit from the multivitamins because they were already getting that benefit from their diet.
Ah, interesting. Well, I'm glad I ate Swiss chard last night. So yes, my mother, it paid off. Well, eat your carrots too. That was
eat your carrots. That's the beta-carotene.
Right. Unless you're a smoker. Okay. And as people age, what's the average, if there is one, age that one might anticipate the diagnosis of a macular or start being symptomatic of macular?
By definition, age-related macular degeneration happens after the age of 65. Mm-hmm. So by definition, if you have it before, if you have degenerative changes in your macula before the age of 65, it's a different type of macular degenerative process, either related to nearsightedness or something else that's hereditary. So as we get into our late 60s and early 70s, that's really when we see the condition.
And is there a study that has findings relative to what the likelihood is that one would inherit that predisposition or have that predisposition?
Certainly there is a hereditary component, but I don't know of really good studies that say this is one specific risk for developing it, beyond knowing that there's a generalized increase in risk. The variance is so great in those genetic kinds of analyses, probably because so little is known about family history and specifically what types of macular degeneration people had in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know. I just remember, and maybe it was because I was younger, but as a child, or even in my teen years and 20s and 30s, stop there, I don't ever remember hearing about macular degeneration.
Yeah, I've heard that before, and I don't really know what to make of it, other than as we age, and more of us are aging for longer, it's a condition that becomes more prevalent.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's a greater awareness of the condition because people are living longer and we're just more aware of the health problems that affect seniors.
Yeah, well, that's true. I didn't think about it, and it kind of circles back to what you said in the beginning about the macular degeneration, that it's due to the fact that the eye is aging.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we're almost outliving our eyes. It's the same problem with glaucoma. The prevalence of glaucoma is almost 100% by the age of 100 because we use up all of that nerve tissue over the course of our lifetimes if you live that long. It's ubiquitous as we age.
You just wonder, as we're living longer, well, I guess if you're healthy, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk, I guess, about the other two age-related diseases that we haven't yet delved into are both cataracts and glaucoma. But you just started to address that briefly. We are going to take a short break, and I'm wondering if maybe when we come back, we'll start with the glaucoma and then talk about the cataracts.
That sounds wonderful.
When we come back from our break.
Sure.
Sound like a plan?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay. And we will be right back.
Cook foods to the right temperature using a food thermometer. 3,000 Americans will die from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
Hello, and welcome back to Senior Solutions, where we bring you topics affecting seniors and their loved ones. I'm your host, Mindy Felinton, and I'm joined today by Dr. James Heltzer, who has been talking with us about the changes that the eye goes through as we age. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And where we left off, and thank you again for being here, we left off with wanting to come back and learn about the other two age-related diseases, glaucoma and cataracts.
Okay.
So I'll leave it up to you to tackle whichever one you want first.
Why don't we start with glaucoma?
Okay.
Glaucoma is another age-related condition, and it comes most often associated with high pressure, which is the primary risk factor for glaucoma.
Is that high blood pressure?
No, this is actually high pressure in the eye.
Okay.
This is something that's a very common question. So there's a circulation system inside of the eye that brings nutrients and takes away waste from some of the clear structures inside of the eye, the cornea and the lens, because if you had blood vessels in those structures, you wouldn't be able to see through them. So there's a whole circulation system inside of the eye that's different than your blood and different than tears. And that's the pressure system where the pressure gets elevated. And that elevation and pressure can then lead to damage at the level of the optic nerve. So high pressure is a risk factor for glaucoma. Family history is a risk factor for glaucoma. Race is a risk factor for glaucoma. People who are African American are at much higher risk. Age is a risk factor for glaucoma. Nearsightedness, and finally diabetes. Those are the big ones.
Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, you're good. And what are the treatments that are available for glaucoma?
There are a number of treatments for glaucoma. Drops are the primary treatment that we use. Laser treatment exists, and finally there are surgical treatments. And so we've got a closet full of medications we can use, a series of different laser treatments of increasing invasiveness, and finally we have a number of surgical procedures. And that's really a side of things that's moved forward tremendously in the past few years with something called MIGS. We love acronyms in medicine. And MIGS are minimally invasive glaucoma surgeries. And so these minimally invasive surgeries are starting to replace some of our much more invasive surgeries in terms of helping us to treat those patients who are amenable to those kinds of interventions.
That's great to know that you've made such progress.
It's terrific.
And so it's unlikely that it sounds to me like someone would actually suffer blindness as a result of glaucoma.
Unfortunately, that isn't true.
I'm a cockeyed optimist.
One of the most extraordinary studies I've ever learned about is a Baltimore eye study related to glaucoma, and this was completed within a few miles of Johns Hopkins, which is one of our premier ophthalmology institutions in the country.
I've been there.
And within a few miles of Johns Hopkins, they found that 50% of glaucoma was undiagnosed. It's a disease with no signs, or very few signs until late in the disease. So most people who have glaucoma don't really know that they have it because it takes your peripheral vision first and really only takes the central vision late in the course of the disease. So the onus is really on the patient to get an eye exam, and then it's on the ophthalmologist or optometrist or eye care provider to find it while they're getting their eye exam.
But if found early, then what's the likelihood of successful treatment?
The likelihood is good, but not perfect. There are still some types of glaucoma that are rapidly progressive. People have to really remember to be consistent with their treatments, their drops in most cases. One of the studies, a study out of the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, found that there's still a 25% incidence of blindness in one of two eyes within 10 years of the diagnosis of glaucoma. So people are still going blind from glaucoma, but primarily that's because the disease is diagnosed later than we want to diagnose it.
So it's good to get your eye exam.
Absolutely.
Well, speaking
Absolutely.
of which, what's your recommendation as people are aging and our elderly population? How frequently should they get a thorough eye exam, and what does that entail?
People over the age of 65, the American Academy of Ophthalmology recommends once a year for eye exams, unless you've got one of the conditions that requires more frequent surveillance. And that eye exam is going to involve measuring your vision, examining the structures within the eye, checking the pressure inside of the eye. In lots of cases, it involves checking your peripheral vision, the movement of your pupils, the movement of the eye muscles, lots of things like that.
Mm-hmm. So when you sit in front of that thing and it poof, that's checking the pressure?
That puff of air is called a pneumotonometer, and I would say that that's more of an out-of-date way to measure the pressure. Most ophthalmologists I know, and everywhere in my training, use something called an applanation tonometer, which is a way of measuring pressure more directly on the surface of the eye, and you don't feel that puff of air. It's a much more comfortable way to measure pressure. So that puff shouldn't be a barrier for anybody to get their eye exam.
Yes. Ooh, what was I thinking? That was 30 years ago. Okay. Well, I have a question that came to mind relative to what should one consider when selecting an ophthalmologist?
What should one consider?
Yeah, what are some of the things that, when you're looking around and you're thinking about going to an ophthalmologist?
I would say, to start with, I think word of mouth is a wonderful way to help figure out who you should go see. If you have friends or family members who have been to an ophthalmologist that they like, then you're probably going to like that ophthalmologist. Those kinds of personal recommendations, I think, are invaluable. There are lots of external resources, things like the Washingtonian Magazine and Super Docs and things like that. And while those lists can be useful, there are plenty of really good ophthalmologists or doctors for that matter, who aren't listed, and some pretty lousy ones who are listed. So I think word of mouth is a great way to start. And then once you're at that office, how the office is run, how how the staff interact, how that doctor communicates with you, how clean everything is, how modern everything is, all of that's going to factor into the sort of the overall quality of the experience and give you an indication to how good that ophthalmologist or doctor is, because it all dovetails together. And somebody who runs a tight ship is going to be a good doctor who's paying attention to the latest and newest material.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Very helpful. All right, so on, without further ado, drum roll, cataracts.
Cataracts.
Probably, would that be one of the most common?
I would say it is probably one of them. I did 7 cataract surgeries already today.
Oh, wow.
So, yes, so cataract surgery is a really common problem. Cataracts, many people think of it as a film over your eye, a film affecting the vision, when really it's a clouding of the intraocular lens, your natural lens. And so cataracts and cataract surgery involves removing that clouded lens and replacing it with an artificial lens.
And at what point in one's life can you expect to start suffering from
I think we start to see the earliest visual changes from a cataract most of the time in people's 50s, but we usually aren't removing the cataracts until people's 60s or 70s. That's certainly something that comes earlier now as the technology is advanced. We used to wait until a lens ripened. That was a phrase that everybody heard years ago. But that was because the incisions were so much larger when we did cataract surgery in the early 1990s. So you had to make a big semicircular incision that was really almost half the arc length of the eye and squeeze the entire lens up and out like a pit. And to make that work, you had to have a ripe enough lens to squeeze it up and out. And then we didn't have artificial lenses that we could fold up into smaller and smaller incisions. And so we had to make these big, large incisions. And so we wanted to wait a little bit on the surgery. Now that the surgery has evolved, we're making incisions that are really only about 2 millimeters in size. People are seeing within a few hours of the surgery. It's much, much safer. And the visual outcomes are so good that we're going to get these cataracts earlier and earlier. It's not to say it's a procedure that's not without risks. It does carry risks, and you have to be judicious about that surgery. But we're making such advances in that procedure that, as a general whole, we're starting to take cataracts out earlier when they start to become symptomatic for patients.
And how do you know that you're symptomatic? Your vision. Does it affect your vision?
Sure. So clouding of vision is one of the primary symptoms of cataract. People start to struggle in low light. They have trouble driving at night. They have problems with glare. And all of that sort of combines to affect the quality of someone's vision. And so the question I really ask patients to consider is, are you frustrated by the quality of your vision at least once a day? And if the answer to that question is yes, then it's probably time for cataract surgery.
Mm-hmm. And again, the $4 million question for this as well. Is there anything that people can do to prevent or slow down cataracts?
The prevention things for macular degeneration really do dovetail very well with the cataract side of things. So UV protection is invaluable, wearing your sunglasses, and having a diet rich in the antioxidants. Not necessarily that specific AREDS formulation, but a good diet rich in antioxidants. So eat all the different colors of the rainbow. Get your berries with your blues, and your reds with your tomato, and the greens and the green leafy vegetables, the orange with your carrots. All of that diversity in the multivitamin spectrum is really good for preventing cataracts.
I forgot about the lycopene, right?
Yes.
You mentioned the UVA,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also the sunglasses, too, that have the UVA and, is it UVB?
Yeah.
Protection? Yeah, he says it sounds a little skeptical.
It gets very confusing for patients.
Yes.
And so I would say this. Wearing sunglasses is really important. And just the process of the 2 or 3 minutes that you might not wear anything and sort of fumbling with your fumbling to find a pair of sunglasses, you're getting 100% exposure. And the difference between getting 99.1 and 99.5 of it blocked when you're really battling between the UVA and the UVB and the UVC and all these different levels isn't quite as important as just wearing something. And when you're wearing something, you want something to be wrappy so that it's blocking light from the sides. Big arms are good and big lenses are good because all of the light that comes in from the sides is really important. Doesn't matter how good that lens right in front of your eye is if a whole lot of light is getting in from the side. And because sunglasses make your pupil dilate, because they're lowering the amount of light that's getting in, much more light can get in from the sides.
Like those, I have those sunglasses that I wear over my glasses, so they have the wraparound.
That's a fantastic style to wear.
Okay,
Very
well
protective.
that's good to know.
Yes.
And then you...
And quite stylish, too.
Oh, not. So not. It's funny because I literally earlier had stopped in to look at some sunglasses. And I was telling the girl how I wear those over my glasses. And I said, they're not the most stylish, but now that I'm talking with you, I don't care.
Very good.
Keep my eyesight more important than looks.
Another set of eyes saved.
We've conquered everything then. And I had another question, and I lost it in thought. So moving along, it maybe will come back to me. Oh, I know. It did. So the other question I have relative to sunglasses, this is just totally something personal, but you see the cheap sunglasses that say they have UVA, the sun protection, versus the expensive ones. And my mother always says, you got to get the expensive ones. Do you know? I mean, does it really matter if the sunglasses are portrayed as...
Yeah. What I can tell you is that sunglasses are not particularly well regulated when you're buying them from someplace other than an optician's shop or a specific for sunglasses kind of place. It's not as well regulated. I think the labeling is probably accurate, but we have no way of knowing because we just don't have any way of knowing in a lot of those places. So if you go to a beach shop and you're buying a pair of sunglasses for $22 that says UVA, UVB, I don't know whether that protection really does measure up. What I do know, though, is that wearing something is a whole lot better than wearing nothing. And if that's what you need, if that's the only thing you can get, wear that.
Yeah.
Because that's better than nothing.
So the dollar store ones are better than nothing. Okay. All right. That's good. Now, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you or your office and come in to see you, how would they do that?
They could find us on the web. We have a website at BethesdaEye.com, BethesdaEye.com. They could call the office at 301-493-9600.
And you accept a lot of insurances?
We do.
Okay. And that was another question I had relative to the cataract surgery. Is that something that insurance does cover?
It does. Insurance covers cataract surgery, including Medicare.
That's helpful for people. And are there treatments for, I would imagine the treatments for glaucoma and macular would also be covered by insurance?
Absolutely. That goes all under the medical side of things. You don't have to worry about having a vision plan or anything like that. These are medical conditions, and if you have cataract, if you have glaucoma, if you have macular degeneration, those are medical ailments and covered under your medical insurance.
Great. Well, this was really helpful for me. I learned a lot. Thank you so much for being here.
It was fun to be here. Thank you for having me.
And if you have any ideas for a topic you'd like to see on Senior Solutions, please feel free to email me at seniorsolutionsTV@gmail.com. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.